Welcome to this session, What I've Learned Over 20 Years in Adult Education. Jake Gerges, Executive Director for Wisconsin Literacy, will be presenting this session. Wisconsin Literacy is a nonprofit literacy coalition that unites over 80 member agencies across the state to strengthen the power of learning in every community. Through collaboration, professional development, health, digital and workforce literacy programs, and advocacy, we expand opportunities to build a more equitable, literate Wisconsin. We would like to share a Wisconsin literacy mission moment with you that will highlight ways that together with our members, we strengthen literacy statewide. I'd like to introduce Jamie Cobes, the manager of tutor training and digital literacy, who will be doing the mission moment on tutor training resources.
All right, welcome everyone. If you are just joining and you're unmuted, if you could mute, that would be wonderful so we can eliminate some background noise. I am going to quickly share some of our online resources for tutor training. So right now you should be seeing, I'm sharing my screen, you should be seeing our website. And I'm going to go under training. If you don't see these tabs across the top when you visit our website, chances are you see like a menu icon on the right or a plus sign, and that's where you will find training. And then we'll go to tutor training. And I'm actually going to share this link in the chat with everyone so that you can bookmark it or share it with your tutors. And then I'll just sort of walk you through what we offer here. So on our tutor training page, you will see tutor training in 4 different categories. We have 2 introductory tutor training series. So if tutors are just getting started, they can go to either ELL Introductory Tutor Training Series or Adult Literacy ABE Introductory Tutor Training Series. In addition to that, we have had some requests, particularly from people who are already trained as K-12 teachers, to have like a condensed version of our ELL tutor training. So that is linked here directly on the page. And then our 4th category of tutor training is ongoing tutor training by topic. In addition, if you scroll down a little bit on this page, you can see all of the live sessions that we're offering. And you can register for those. So this month later, we're offering a digital tools for teaching online reading collections. I'll take you through just a glimpse of some of these. So if you go to the ELL Introductory Tutor Training Series, you're going to see that it is divided into 5 courses. If you are a tutor coordinator or a volunteer coordinator, you can click here and get our recommendation for pacing this out. It can feel a little overwhelming to tell tutors, do this all. So we have some pacing recommendations, sort of just-in-time model recommendations about when in the tutoring journey or training process it makes sense to do these. Tutoring adults, what you need to know, we like to think of that as sort of the introduction to tutoring, but also to adult education and what it means to teach adults. And so this is a great course to share with people who have shown any interest in volunteering with your agency. It's also a prerequisite to the rest of our introductory tutor training series, both for ELL and for adult basic education or adult literacy. So everybody can take this one. It's an online course, and then they can decide, do they want to do getting started and then 1, 2, and 3 live in a Zoom cohort with Wisconsin literacy staff? And if so, they can find that on the calendar below. Or they can do it self-paced when it makes sense for them with our online course versions. So I'll just click into getting started to show you what an online course looks like. So you can click start here. There's also a brief overview and an estimated completion time here. And you can see all of the modules contained in this course below. The great thing about these online courses is that it tracks your progress and your completion through them. So if I make it to first meeting with a student and then I have to quit for the day and I come back, it does ask you if you want to resume where you left off. The other nice thing about the online courses is while we have decided that it makes sense to us to go in the order presented here, you're not required to complete one lesson before you move to the other. So if you have a tutor who's not new and they're coming back for a refresher, and you really just want them to look, for example, at components of reading instruction, they could jump right to that module. The other thing I wanted to share about these courses is each of these courses in the introductory tutoring training series in the conclusion module contains a certificate of completion that tutors can print out for themselves. And it is personalized. So they just type their name in here and they hit next, and then it creates the certificate, and then they would click on print. The same is true for the adult literacy introductory tutor training series. It looks very similar. It's just going to be focused more on native or native-like speakers of English. The ongoing tutor training by topic is a great page to get, we dive a little bit deeper into topics in ELL tutoring, digital literacy, and then additional topics. And we only have this one additional topic right now, but this is a place where I want to mention to you that if you have requests for topics that you'd like to see, we welcome those and we can build courses based on those. ELL, you can see, is our biggest category. We've been really focusing our efforts on building mini courses for each of these topics in ELL. So for example, if you go to any of these, it is versus our introductory tutor training courses, which are a little bit longer, each of these will give you a time, and they are no more than 30 minutes each. So mini courses, like I said, dive a little bit deeper into those topics. Are there any questions that I can answer about tutor training? All right. Thank you so much for letting me share.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jamie. And again, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to answer any resource questions for you. Now I am very pleased to introduce our own Jake Gerges, our Executive Director, who is going to be sharing with us what he has learned over 20 years in adult education. So thank you very much, Jake, and I will pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everybody for attending. It's good to see so many faces and names that I recognize. I want you to know that if I am looking over this way, I'm actually making eye contact with you all. So it's not me gazing off to the side. I want to take a couple of seconds to introduce myself and kind of share my experience with you all. And what it came down to is that I wanted to figure out how to tell you all about the different experiences I've had and what I've learned over the last 20 years. But I thought it was easier to tell you a little bit about my story and then kind of break down the pieces that I found the most success in. So I hope the storytelling method works, and I'm going to get started. So I am now the executive director of Wisconsin Literacy. That is a position that I didn't know that I was ever going to have, and I never really planned on doing work outside of on-the-ground work. So, but when you do enough on-the-ground work, sometimes you figure out that you want to make a higher upstream impact on potentially the work that you're doing. So to tell you a little bit about myself real quick, I grew up in New London, Wisconsin. Please don't hold that against me, or if you're a bulldog, put a Chad in there right now. I moved to Milwaukee when I was 20 to go to college. I went to UWM. I might be stealing from another slide by telling you this piece, but I was one of the only people that studied adult education at UWM. When I was there, I met my wife, Emily, and we've been together for not, I didn't mean it like that, 15, 16 years, but I meant when you start to think about the time that you spent with somebody, you go, how can it already be 15, 16 years? We have two sons, an 8 and a 10-year-old, and I tell you, I should have had kids earlier. They're a lot of energy, and It's exciting, but I tell you, they keep me busy. So I want to just start out by level setting with you all. I don't understand everyone's program, the subtleties of the programs that everyone runs. So what I tell you in my presentation isn't going to be a one-for-one fit for everybody's experience. But I do want you to know that my arrow is north, and I'm telling you the things that I believe would make the greatest impact for your program. Um, I also want you to know that this is not going to be from like the executive director perspective to some degree because I did a lot more work on the ground than I have in the executive level. So this is stuff that I've came across during the time I've struggled with, I've gotten completely not right. So I want you to know that this is going to be a much informal conversation that I think will still have pertinence to everybody. So please know that my arrow is north. I'm going to share with you like we're in the room. And if you have questions, please just ask them when they feel organic because that's the way real conversations happen. And I wish we could all be in one spot together. So I did want to give you an outline of the conversation and what we're going to be talking about in this session. These were the biggest pieces that I found the highest yield for this conversation. And how I came about this, I just want to be honest with you. When I was trying to think of the biggest impact and what I could talk about, I really just thought about the steps that I would take with a student because that's really what mattered in the programming we were delivering was, outreach, getting people in the door, and then I thought to myself, well, what were the next things that we ran into? And it was assessment and intake. That process was really key to whether or not people would continue coming to this school. One things that I really found another big piece that I worked on for several years was relaying the expectations for the school. And it feels a bit burdensome to do this work, but I'll get into that a little bit more. But I promise you, these are the steps that I found the highest yield. And not more than any of those, but as important of a piece is when we talk about what we're doing and the stories that we're telling, that cannot be a piece that we forget. It can't be too much of a piece either, but it needs to be represented in our actual work because not everyone understands how difficult what we're doing and how detailed it is. So, a little bit about my past. I want to tell you that I never planned on doing more than just teaching. The greatest joy that I had in this work was seeing that like light bulb moment go off in people's eyes when you said the right things, when it went from obscurity to struggle and then that struggle to understanding, that was the best. I mean, if you could bottle that and drink that in the morning, I tell you, you'd get up better than coffee. But I only intended to be an instructor. So I went to UWM and I studied adult learning and really how that was different from how children learn. And I have a big long story about that process and how it changed my perspective, but I'll spare you this level of details because I'll go into a bunch more later. When I was in school, somebody from the Social Development Commission, which was the CAP agency in Milwaukee County, asked me if I'd be willing to intern there. And I got to be honest, I wanted to be a history professor. So I didn't know what I wanted to be a history professor in, though. So they said, well, get a degree in educational studies. That'll teach you how to teach in college. And I ended up getting an internship at the Social Development Commission. And at that time, they had the only HSED or 509 program around. And I got to be honest with you, like the science behind it and the interaction with the students, it took me over. And when they asked me to intern, my dad told me that I should ask them if they had a part-time paid position. And this was in like that weird time in the early 2000s. And I asked them and they said, well, yeah, we'll pay you to stay on, which was a miracle. And everybody ended up leaving the organization right around the time that I got in there. So I ended up getting a coordinator position and ran a GD testing center as well. And I got to be honest with you all, I was not old enough to be doing this. I didn't know what I was doing. And in college, they never taught me how to write on a whiteboard or a chalkboard. So I was really out of my element, and I was working for a quasi-governmental organization that had procurement forms for procurement forms. I was really in over my head, and I want you to know that I cut my chops there. I got things wrong. I said things in the incorrect way. I created restrictions that impacted people in ways that I would never do now, but it was part of the learning process. And what I did in that organization was I made sure that those mistakes, I didn't repeat them, especially the ones that became a pattern. Through that agency, I did a ton of different outreach, and I'm trying to make sure that I don't jump ahead in my story, but forgive me if it feels organic. I'm just going to tell it when it comes up. But I really cut my chops there, and in the GED testing examiner position, I was able to look at a bunch of different data and details of who was passing and who wasn't. I also got to see how the norming process of the 2014 examination happened, which was a really unique view that not a lot of people had. So I had a really big perspective. I was operating a program that frankly was the only one around at that time. And we were doing different intake and enrollment processes that I think will help further this conversation. In 2014, I moved to the YWCA and I became a manager of their learning lab, which was just one room per se and a testing center. During that time, I want to be very honest with you, the YWCA was the largest testing center in the state of Wisconsin. And by seeing the norming process occur in the GED exam, I really feared that that test was not going to be accessible to everybody. In the year 2014, and that little bit of carryover time, we went from graduating 417 people that last year to 7 the following year. Our students were making good academic gains in the other areas where we tested them, but that wasn't translating to the GED exam. So I had to convince this organization, and I love them, and so forgive me, but they didn't understand what a HSED program was or a 509 program was. So I had to take time and advocate for the students, compile data, and show them that the students who we worked for were being adversely impacted by the changes in the GED exam. In the meantime, though, I needed to prove that what we were doing was actually best practice because they didn't want to change something if it wasn't broken. So we did crosswalks between the TABE test, which was TABE 910 at that time. We did crosswalks between that and the old GED, and then we crosswalked that to the new GED exam and the practice exams. So a lot of this work was trying to convince people that we needed to do what was the right thing. And I was able to accomplish that through a lot of data-driven decision making. But it also included a lot of different data sets, and I had to make sure that I was coming across as authentic and that the data was real. During that time, I'm going to go to my shameless plug. So here's my shameless plug to make sure that I have a complete, complete storytelling. When I was at the SDC, I ended up creating a different 509 program as well that was based on practical application reviews. So my best thought was if we brought people into the program, they should demonstrate the skill set through an assessment. It was a short time frame so people could get in it and get out, and it also was able to be bundled with some other side projects and side initiatives like Youth Build and different pieces like that. So this is where I feel a little bit bashful about telling you about the HSED program I created. And I promise I will stop doing this in a few more seconds, but I wanted to establish credibility that I've done this work so the recommendations that I'm making in the future truly are what I've experienced. It's not everyone's experience, but it's mine. And when I went to the YWCA, I ended up showing through data that I had as a chief examiner that Black and brown folks in the zip codes we served were 18 to 24% less likely to pass a GED exam than people with the exact same demographic data. I was only able to do that work because we gathered demographic data, because the students that came there were familiar with the program, and they offered us the information that allowed me to make those connections. So I created a program after 10 years of working at SDC, and what I decided was I was just going to do the things that worked, and I wasn't going to do the things that didn't. And I know that sounds foolish, but when you see things in your programs that just are always grinding, you can readdress them. It's your program. You can look at them and wonder why they don't work. And the best people to ask are the students. They know why it doesn't work for them. A lot of what I'm going to say today is just going to feel like common sense, but really good programming is nothing more than stringing common sense and compassion together to make sure students feel welcome. So I created the HSCD at the YWCA as a cohort model that was modular. So you get like a coin in your piggy bank each time you passed it. And why did I do that? Because retention is hard sometimes, right? And if you're asking for really detailed attendance, you got to make sure that people's life happened, they can get back into the program. So I made it a 20-week program that was modular. Eventually, it started having test out options, right? So if people had already passed the GED exam, they didn't need to redo that. What happened was we ended up getting this program up and running, and it grew in size and it grew in capacity. And the city of Racine had a GED initiative that we ended up partnering with them. They wrote a grant to the What Works Cities initiatives by the Bloomberg Philanthropies. It was also supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Bloomberg, or the Ballmer Group. And we ended up winning a national best practice in adult education based on the program I created. This is getting long-winded besides to say to you that all of these things were just a series of putting together small, tiny things, gauging how people reacted to it, ensuring that you were doing it with designed with empathy and delivered uniformly for about 80% of the people. And I'll get to that soon. It ended up winning some stuff, and I'm going to keep on going here. But the other part was we had the test out option. I wanted to share that I accidentally wrote the state of Wisconsin's health test. We didn't have a health test, so we created one, and it ended up becoming the one that DPI recognized. I do not want to talk about myself anymore. Let's talk about some other stuff. So what I wanted to walk through was the journey of the students from intake to testing to classroom management to storytelling, but it didn't start right then. There was another piece that we struggled with on occasion, and that was getting people into the door. So how did we do outreach? The first thing that I realized is I needed to know who was in my community. Who are we trying to work with? What services exist in the community and what services are still needed? And the other piece I needed to understand is I couldn't do everything. We weren't a food bank, we weren't a clothing closet, we weren't all of the pieces, even though we wanted to be, but we could work with people inside of there. So the people that already existed in the community, we could strengthen those partnerships. So how did I first know my community? I went to look into what is the size and the makeup of the community. Are there cultural or language groups that need to have tailored outreach for? What organizations work with these groups of individuals? Frankly, we needed to know whether or not we were marketing to a younger group or an older group. Was there a language that we needed to be specific about marketing to? What percentages of the people in the community, like what was the community need? What was the amount of people that were in the community that needed this work? Because we needed to decide how big of a program we needed to make, or how many staff members or offerings we needed to bring in. So when I'm presenting, can you all see my cursor here? All right, don't do that, Jake. I'm more of a Teams, folks. So what were also the barriers to participation? And yeah, I skip ahead one. Understanding who you serve and what they need assistance with, the change in, you find the right audience, you choose the right channels to communicate, and you communicate in ways that resonate. But the big piece that I want to tell you is that when I started to get to the next step in programming, not just delivering frontline programming, but when I was really able to scale the program, I found one website that had so much good data on it that I want to share it right now. And this information that I talk about for Wisconsin literacy, what I've talked about from the YWCA, what I talked about at SDC, came from the American Community Survey. This is the website, and what you can gather there is you can gather population size and age, educational attainment rate, race and ethnicity, language and English proficiency, income and poverty, employment status, household transportation. These are all pieces that when you're truly working to both tell your story, but also do outreach, you can gather a lot of data from this area. So where did I use this? When I was working in Racine, there were certain pockets of individuals that had a much lower attainment rate for education. And what I was able to do then was I was able to call the elementary schools in that area, and I was able to put flyers in the backpacks of the students on the first day when they did the backpack drives. But I needed to know where to do this. I was able to contact the county and the state and the city, and I was able to put up signs for the program in the parks. They owned the park, so I needed permission, but I was able to find those markers in this information and then target the outreach to them. It's not a huge step, but it's adult education and good programming isn't one large step. It's a bunch of tiny little pieces that have to come together. And the first one is getting people in the door. So now what? Now what? We know where everybody is, and we know how to, we know that we need to mix it up a little bit. What else did I want you to know? At the YWCA, we weren't amazing at ELL or adult basic education at NRS level 1. So what did we do? We really talked about the things that we were good at. We were good at GD testing. We were good at getting people into the HSED program, and we were really good at that HSED program, the 509 program. So what I tell you to do is promote what you do best. Have something that you do the best. Hang your hat on that and strengthen that. We had great services in the community, literacy services of Wisconsin, Adult Learning Center at the time. They were great, and they had great, robust tutor programming that did one-on-one work, but that wasn't who we were, so we didn't pretend to be that. We all had places that we could work together. The other part that I found the most impactful is use multi-sector collaborations. There are bottlenecks where you can find through the demographics where people will be more likely to engage in. And I don't want to overgeneralize, but people that have been impacted by education and don't have adult education, have English language proficiency work being done, or don't have a high school diploma, there are oftentimes places where people come together, and social service programmers, food share and those different programs, they oftentimes have education requirements. So when you do outreach can have an amplified effect if you reach out to places where people with demographics and economic indicators also utilize their services. Ensure that the message is what is important to the learners. Remember that all adult education people, they are centered around the fact that this needs to be pertinent to them. Why would they engage with your services? They're not doing this for fun. They're the ones that want to help their kids with the math problems, or they want to be able to fill out the applications online. So make sure that you understand what your community needs and focus in on that. So real learner success. What I want to say is that nothing is easier to do than talk about success. But you need to make sure that when you're talking about them, you do it with their consent, and we'll get into that in a little bit later. The biggest piece about outreach, though, is who your best advertising agents are? The people that understand you do a great job. Your learners. They will engage, they will tell their friends, they will tell their families. And I can't tell you the amount of times that at graduation I'd take pictures and I would see people from the past that told the next person to come to our services. That is when I knew that the work that we were doing inside of our agency was resonating. When we set it up correctly, we did it with compassion. People were trusting us with their loved ones. You have people in your programs right now that will share how they feel about you. Utilize them. And if you're ever going to pay for advertisements, think about giving a finder's fee to the people that are in your program. I have a study that I'll link with this too. Part of winning that national award is that they studied the program through a bunch of different lenses. And one of them was through a group called Behavioral Insights, who actually studied why the program was successful and how we could scale it to actually make a larger level impact in Racine. So I'll be able to link that inside of this notes later, but it's a big old study and we don't have time to page through it now. So I'm going to talk about assessments, and I know people get very nervous about this topic. So I want you to know that one of the pieces that I've always followed is a thing called the 80-20 rule. And if you want to do a thing, it needs to work for 80% of who you serve. For that 80%, like the 80% efforts, once you standardize it and once you get it into a groove where you know what the next step is, that'll only end up taking about 20% of your time. So everyone wants to dive in and give everyone individualized services right away. But if you design with equity in mind, you can make a program that services the vast majority if you know your population, if you know the need, if you know the limitations and what may stop them from coming in, you can design with equity. So for the people that match up, make your program designed around 80% of your learners. That will only take up 20% of your time. And what that does is that moves the people that don't need the extra work to the side and allows you to focus 80% of your effort on the people that the 20% that need the extra stuff. So design with equity, design for the 80%, but you need to know who that is and where they're at. So when I say this, why did I put this right here under the scales and the assessment and intake piece? I understand that this isn't going to resonate for everyone, that there are limitations in assessments, and I have fought at the highest level against standardized assessments, but there is a need to do this in this work. And it's not going to work for 20% of you, I guess is where I'm going with this, but for the other 80%, I hope this resonates. Resonate, the word of the day from Jake. Dun, dun, dun. All right. So what are standardized assessments? Formal assessments, they measure adult literacy and skills in a standardized way. This does not deviate. It's kind of a gross system, but it measures reading, writing, math, English proficiency on occasion. And what it did for my programs, it gave us an up or down. It gave us where we should place people according to their scores. All right, I'm going to tell you something that I didn't intend to tell you. When we were using the TABE 11 and 12, was that the past series? We ended up only using the M test at intake. We did not do a locator test. The reason why we did that was anyone that scored below that level in the assessment, they were going to need additional assistance because of the scale score range of that assessment. If they scored above the M range in reading and math, they were GED ready right at that time. No work needed to be done. So we studied the exam to figure out what loopholes and what areas that we could find, and that was allowable by TABE. You can use a specific test if it matches the need of your program. So another little hack that we did right away was the first assessment we gave, though, was a practice GED exam right off the bat. People came to our program, they weren't going to sit in a 20-week class for the life of them. They were going to pass their GED that day. So let's give them apples to apples. A TABE doesn't mean nothing to anybody, right? Nobody knows what a TABE test is or what a scale score of 508 is. So they know what a GED is. That information's out there, and they know what a passing score is. It was actually it was cheaper, and it was able to be delivered remotely as well. So we gave everybody a practice reading exam in the GED test. And if they passed that, we gave them a practice math test. If they passed both of those, we gave them the other practice test and started signing them up. But we were able to show them a connection to what they wanted to achieve versus the areas that they were trying to strengthen. And because we gave both of those assessments, we were continuing to be able to build on the strengths that we had in our program by tweaking a little lesson here and tweaking a little lesson there when we saw the results change. Why does this matter, though, in a holistic sense? I want you to know that the number one priority I had was telling the truth to these students and not wasting their time. Time is our only real currency in life. We only have one life. And if we're having people work in areas that are so outside of what they're capable of doing at that time, we're wasting their time. If we're reteaching them something they already know. And really, more than anything, when I was talking about wanting to write the HSED program, I needed to make sure the stuff we were doing was actually working. Are we being good stewards of these individual time and how we deliver our programming? The success metrics are based on standardized tests often, but they don't show everything. So how do we get to know them? How do we get to know whether or not they were impacted by the formatting of the standardized test? That comes later in the intake. But I want to know that it's the ability to show growth over time can lead to the perception of program effectiveness. It is not the only measurement, though, so I want to make sure I'm saying that. And when my program reached a level of, I'm going to say, very high funding comparatively, the assessments were tied to performance metrics for funding. Again, I created probably my career based on bias in a standardized test. So I understand the hesitancy, but I wanted to keep everyone accountable and I needed to find a way to measure it. I needed to make sure we were being good stewards of the community and the people that devoted their time to us. And that's why we continued to utilize standardized testing, even though it wasn't perfect. So what I found out really, really quick, though, is that if I were to tell the story of the people that were in NRS level 2, right, or NRS level 1 or ELL learning, those things don't happen quickly, right? Those are foundational skill sets. So we needed to make sure that we bundled our stuff together to learn more, learn about potential gaps of our services. So we needed to combine not only the quantitative data, but we needed to know these students better. So we began to do interviews and observations, setting goals, and we wanted to make sure that we had the best experience for the learners and they understood why we were doing the work together. It wasn't that we wanted to personalize this as much as possible, but we needed to make sure that we had a set for them to succeed and we measured our production and our efforts towards that. So we ended up going in after the assessment, we ended up doing a participation agreement. And that's going to be the next slide, but we also did personal education plans. We gathered demographics and we did a letter to the learner. Jamie, can you remind me if I don't circle back to the letter to the learner? That is the most important piece of all of this, and I think it's the only thing I didn't make a slide on. So make sure I say that piece. One thing that I found is that when I was talking about creating a program where people came 4 days a week, 4 hours a day, they looked at me and they said, well, that's too much. That's not the way our program is set up. Like we're a drop-in lab and we have tutors and people won't do that. They won't come every day. Well, what if you just told them that if they did that, they could graduate in 20 weeks? If they came every day, did the work, got 80% on it, they could graduate at a certain time. I wanted to make sure that they understood that every day they came to my school, that the bathroom would be clean. It might be the best bathroom that they use that day. It might be the best place they go to that day. The tables would be cleaned off. I would wake up in the morning and wipe the tables with cleanser because I wanted that to be something they didn't consider. They didn't have the crumbs on there or the sticky. Every piece of the process, they knew what to expect from us. How many of you all have worked in a trauma-informed care setting, or a way that you made sure that you were very intentional about the way that you engage with individuals? Thanks. It's good. Thank you few that stayed on there to nod your head. I'm feeding off of it, so thank you. One thing that I found was when I surprised people, they got really mad. They didn't like to be surprised. And we needed to set up some basic rules. It couldn't just be a free-for-all. And the first rule I made, and I honest to goodness did this, you all, I made a rule sheet. The first one, it just said, be cool. And I actually distributed it and had people sign it, be cool. I wasn't necessarily great at this initially. So that be cool, I found out very quickly that cool was relative and I needed to be more concrete about what the expectations were. So telling them what time their classes start, what the expectations are inside of there. I oftentimes read this participation agreement as a joke because when people come in, they don't know how this will impact them. So when you bring them in, you tell them right off the bat what the expectations are, but also that you will ensure that a teacher's in that room for them. You create consistency. Everybody wants consistency, and for the individuals that didn't complete their high school in the traditional American sense, they've had issues that have stopped them from moving forward that they didn't see coming. The participation agreement created an island. It created an island of understanding and knowing what the expectations were. And I promise you this, every time I raised the expectations for students, whether it was tightening up, whether it was having to come into Friday because of missing so many days, of school, they always reached it as long as I approached this with respect and I expected greatness of them because they were capable of it. But it was always done to move them forward, and it wasn't self-serving. We had super strict attendance policies, but we wanted to know how many people we could service. And it wasn't that they couldn't come back, but hey, we're expecting you. We're expecting you to be here. You expect us to have the lights on, right? What days will you be here? And then we'd ask them inside of a piece, hey, when you stop coming here, when should we give up on you? Do you know what? After we started saying, when should we stop calling you? Do you know there was never a time where we called the student again where they got mad at us for reaching out? And there wasn't a single person that ever told us on their orientation day that we should give up on them. We also got bat phone lines, the ones where we go, hey, if we can't get a hold of you, how do you want us to get a hold of you? We need the bat line. We were joking with them. They gave us their mother's phone numbers. They were engaged. They wanted to participate, right? And we were doing this with the best intentions possible. So we signed the agreement, we labeled them out, and the students knew what to expect from us. Did it work for every student? No, it didn't. About 80% though. About 80%. For 20%, we needed to find alternative ways to reach them, but we had a lot of time to do that because we made a system that worked. It reduced anxiety. It promoted respect and equity. People knew how to operate and thrived when expectations were clear. I want to ask you, if you don't think people can show up on time for a class, or you don't think they can attend a certain amount of time if they signed up for it, I want to ask, internally, why don't you believe they're capable of that? I never one time thought when I was doing this work that people weren't capable of it. But when barriers came up through this process, we helped them address it. We connected them with other organizations that helped with food. We helped them, they helped with childcare, transportation. We found the people that provided that and we partnered with them. So then that way we could have high expectations. So this continued to set goals. We established the reasons for taking the classes. That was the biggest motivating factor. Tell us why. All right, back to the letter. Jamie, I don't need your help anymore. Thank you. The reasons for the letter were because we wanted to ensure that we could remind them of why they were coming here. So how did we do that? Like, this is one of those, just like taking the picture before. If you stop listening to me, this is a great time to start back up. What we did was at the orientation, we had them write themselves a letter. And what we said to them was, we have an envelope right here for you and a piece of paper. And what we want you to do is write yourself a letter of why you're here today. It's getting to be winter, and I know that your program's going to go through the winter season and into the spring, and that's going to be some gross weather, and it's going to be hard to get out of bed. But what I want to ask you is write yourself a note about why you're here today. Nobody can tell you the story of you better than yourself. So please write yourself the letter right now and put it in that envelope, seal it, and we'll put it into a folder, and we'll only give it to you if you need it. And then I'd walk by and put staples through each one of those envelopes. And we would give them to them when they stopped attending classes, when we saw them the next time, when their behavior fluctuated from what we had in our expectations. We would hand them the letter. Not everyone needed it, maybe 20%, right? But we had a solution for the people that didn't follow the rules agreement, that didn't have those pieces. Again, we always asked if there were barriers. I want to get to demographic information, which is another really tough topic for people. People feel intrusive and invasive in this work and by asking for this information. I want to tell you that you can always put in there prefer not to answer. But why does demographic information make a difference inside of people's stuff? The name, date of birth, and gender, it's the anchor of a student file or a student record. You don't want anybody to walk into your school and then you start talking to the wrong person and names repeat, right? People's names oftentimes repeat, especially in communities, naming sequences stay the same. So it's the anchor of that. The contact information and location, phone, zip, and email, it is to make sure that we're targeting the right area, we're working right by there, we're able to connect to nearby services in their community. And how do we talk to you? How do we follow up with you? Emails were always a much better agent. While they didn't respond as quickly as a phone call, emails don't cost anything. Phones cost money. And if you have an email address, you can always shoot them a message and hope that they see it. That shouldn't be shut down because of economic issues. Asking about language and education background prevents people from feeling frustrated and you not understanding how to deliver the services for you. You can target and tailor your program for that. Household income and employment status, it allows us to connect to the right supporting organizations. If they're under a certain threshold, there may be assistance that they qualify for that will lessen the burden of the outside noise. I always compared the students to, in my mind, is like a computer running, but we only have so much RAM. If we want students to learn inside of our setting, we need to clear out the antivirus that's needed to run every day just to survive. How do we do that is we try to connect to services that add additional resources. So they're not worried about the housing. They're not worried about the transportation. So then they can focus in on the center that we've already established as a safe place to come to school. And the other piece, this is a big one. And I'm back on that screen with my pointer, sorry. If people have had IEPs in school, when they were growing up, there are accommodations that should be sought. We should be looking at ways to better service them, from standardized testing to how we deliver our programming. We should know whether or not people have abilities that impact them from either coming into our building to, and I'm sorry if disability status isn't the right language for this piece, but I just wanted to say that we needed, that reason that we asked that specific question is we needed to ensure we knew what people needed to participate in the program and what accommodations we should be advocating at a higher level for them. So I'm trying to bring this all back in full circle, right? And I don't know why my brain set it up this way, but I just wanted you to know that I'm flowing through this piece. If you had good outreach, if you set up a program that was equitable, designed with intention in mind, if you got the people to be able to come into your school, you hooked them up with the supporting services, you created a safe island for people to be at, they're going to succeed. So I didn't need to talk about graduating and all of this stuff, because that's the joy, and I'm going to keep that one for me, right? But I wanted to show you that the importance of storytelling is that nobody knows what we're doing. Nobody understands it. But when people know what you're doing, they can appreciate the work. And this doesn't need to be overtly complex. But when they understand why it's important what you do, they respect the work. And when they know what you do and respect the work, they will support your organization. This isn't just storytelling for funders. This is storytelling for your community. This is telling the leaders in your community that you deserve the respect for the work that you're doing. When they know what you're doing, when they respect the work, they will support it and they will find resources that are available to them when they come up. But I want you to know that everything I just told you, every part of this work is part of your story. From outreach, intake, assessments, agreements, the PEPs, every one of those are all a tool that are built to maximize the understanding of your students. Once you understand your students, you can tell the story of the average learner. I know it's not good to generalize, but when they say, who do you serve and what do you do? You better know those two pieces. If you understand the community, you set up programming that supports it, the community will support you. Using the data inside of here, but connecting an individual story takes it from being a statistic or a number or a need to being a neighbor, a friend, a cousin. If you tell the story correctly, the large number in need in your community will be relatable. These numbers allow you to show that your efforts need action, your actions need outcome, and when you tie this all back, the need is high and we serve the community. What I wanted to say about assessments one more time is that standardized tests help, but they have limits and bias. Scores and outcomes of GED exams doesn't tell people's story. I got some numbers here, y'all. Hot off the presses, right? I'll wait till the next slide to tell you the outcomes of everybody's performances here. But the work that you do every day, the micro gains that occur are your story. The biggest success doesn't happen at graduation. It happens when the light bulb comes on. That's the best I've ever felt, no matter what I've done, is when a learner understood something. But you need to tell the story about the examinations as well. With the participation agreements and all of those other pieces, you're telling your story that you are not just You're a place that is free of distractions. You are that safe island. You're intentional about how you work with people. Oftentimes, your best success doesn't come from the 80%. Your biggest success, the thing that fill your bucket, comes from the 20% that you needed to make the adjustments for. But you're unable to do it for everyone, oftentimes because of limited resources. All of these little pieces tell that your organization is paying attention. It's paying the extra little bit of efforts to the community that employs you. And also, when you ask people stuff on a survey, they're not going to answer it in the same way that if they trust you to have a conversation. The conversation is as important as the assessment, as the outreach. Let them know you're there working for them. So I wanted to share this real quick with you, and I want to leave time for conversation at the conclusion of this as well. We have 15 minutes-ish remaining. Okay, just trying to make sure my clock started at a goofy time. One night I went home and I thought to myself, like, I was sad, had some sad stuff happen at work, and I'm not going to share those pieces with you right now because, again, but I was so sad and I just didn't feel like I was making enough of an impact, given the community need. And I thought to myself, if I just had a bottle cap or an eraser or something for all the people that went through the programs that I operated, right now I would just shake them. I would just shake it so I could feel the difference but sometimes we get burnt out, we have these times where we just don't feel the feels. And I thought, well, what if I just had that bottle cap and a thing right now that I could shake up? Maybe that would make me feel better. And I came up with an analogy that night. How many of you all have had this thing that you just, you haven't necessarily completed? I was supposed to be that college professor, right? And I'm not sad with how this all turned out, so don't get me wrong, but for a long time I was sitting and like that Maggie May song would come on and it was late September and I really should be back at school. And I felt so sad. And it was like a brick was right in my chest and it was so heavy and it was weighing me down. And, when I looked around the classroom the next day, I saw that same brick. People had that weight in their chest and they knew they had stuff that they needed to get done. And as this group went through, I started to see as graduation came, like honestly, like I mean this, like not figuratively, they sat up a little straighter. And the confidence was there and their shoulders were rolled back. And I was like, dang, that brick, they're accomplishing their thing. That brick's less heavy for them. So what I decided to do when I got to the YWCA was I told everybody when they came into the program about my Maggie May, right? When I'm reading the rules agreement, just trying to relate. When I was telling them that we were going to do this extra work and we were going to get the support that they deserve, all of these pieces, I would say to them, but I know that brick's there. And I'd sing the Maggie May song to them, just relating. I would tell them that at the completion of this program, that brick will be removed from your chest. You'll stand up a little taller. And sure enough, every time I'd see a graduate down the road, I wouldn't recognize them. They'd be 3 inches taller, and I don't even think I'm lying about it. They looked great. So what I decided that day was to do a little play on my community at that time. Milwaukee was known for Cream City brick. And it's the clay and the different stuff in the soil there that made these bricks wildly different colors. Sometimes they were like a cream and other times they were red. And it was just a unique thing. So I did a play on there. Since we were talking about bricks and Milwaukee had bricks that they were known for, why don't we take this brick out of our chest and put it up on the wall? And we originally put it in a classroom so when they were in school, they could see that. And what ended up happening was I showed the director that was above me this, and she really liked it. Well, We were a one schoolhouse, right? We were one room schoolhouse per se. Nobody came by us. All of a sudden, people were coming by us to look at that brick wall inside the classroom, but there was school going on. So all of a sudden, they wanted that to be outside of there. So then that way they wouldn't disrupt the school. At that time, the internal dialogue of my organization that did much more than adult education shifted. It was one person's brick that was removed from their chest, put up on the wall, and those are the bricks that are going to rebuild the community. Every funder that ever walked through our school was first taken past the brick wall. When every person in leadership decided that that was a true representation of what we wanted to do, the mindset changed and we became educators completely across the board. All it took was a little bit of styrofoam foam core and painting the bricks a different color. And we were able to change the direction of which an organization went based on storytelling. But none of that would happen if we didn't do the pieces that led up to this. So, being online, I am going to skip a slide. If you do the little pieces correctly, success will happen. You do need to know, though, whether or not you're reaching the people through your outreach that your mission is designed for. But you have to gather some data in order to do that. Are we doing what we're intended to do? When people come into your school, you need to make sure that you understand at least the baseline of who you're working with and what resources they need and what specialization they need. Always build for the 80%, but you need to have the ability to see the 20% and work with them as well. I've always attempted to be kind, to where if you guys ever see me anywhere, if you ask my kids, what are Gurgises? They'll say we're kind. Don't be afraid to ask questions if you don't understand anything. I sat in a lot of rooms, felt pretty lonely, and I was the only one that asked, well, why is it that way? Do we need to do it that way? Always ask that. What's the worst thing that can happen? You stay with the status quo? Keep your arrows north. I promise you this. Times right now are rough out there. But if you keep doing what's right, things will work out. Just make sure that you know who you're working with. You know the community that you're made to serve. You always keep them at the top of your mind. You design equitably. You do the little things right. And you tell the story. Things will work out. All right. Here we go.
Hang
So-
on, Jake. Sorry.
Yeah,
We do have some comments and questions in the chat, if I could share those with you.
perfect. I need to
what-
stop sharing my screen because I want to see people.
One question is, would you be able to share any of the students' bricks of regret?
I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Would you be able to share some of the students' bricks of regret?
Like what they regretted before coming there? Or what? I guess I need more context for the question.
Yeah, we can invite Carrie to unmute or just elaborate in the chat. While that's happening, I'll just read you a comment from earlier. I believe that every GED program fell off significantly in numbers of passing scores during the 2014 test. The introduction of essay in language arts, social studies, and 55% algebra requirements made it an appropriate time to re-examine your demographic, develop new curriculum, and a new approach toward ABE.
Love. Like, I don't know who said it. Love it.
Okay, what kinds of things did students write on their bricks? That was the elaboration of the question.
So the regret, I just want to make sure I'm saying this right. It was the bricks were never about the regret. It was about the success. So that was all like, fall 25. Like it was more of a hype brick. Um we they the regrets in which they shared was that they internalized a lot of their own actions that were outside of their control as something that they've done wrong. And it wasn't fair. They were less kind to themselves than they are to strangers oftentimes. Um, they just thought that, we should have done this. Like we had our shot at this, but then you hear their story and I'd be curled up in a ball if I had that experience myself. So, you know, the some of them thought that they should have made it to school more often, but they also said that their mom was working 3 jobs and that nobody was there to take care of their kid brother or kid sister. And like it's like, so a lot of the stuff that they really intrinsically took on themselves was stuff that I don't think was fair for them.
Thank you. And Marcia in the chat just shared her experience working in your programs, and she's here to corroborate that everything you said is absolutely true. The letter to themselves was such a useful tool. They also wrote a letter to the next student, a letter of support and inspiration to the student who would be taking their seat in the next session. And the students were also able to give teachers a report card, and she learned much from their comments.
The letter to the next person, that was maybe not Marcia. In hindsight, maybe that one wasn't so it had a thing. So on the first day of school, we'd tell them to reach under their chair to get some had a different effect though too. You know what I'm gonna say here, Marcia. So we'd say reach underneath your chair or your table and pull out the note. Somebody left you some inspiring language underneath your desk. So they'd pull it out and they'd look at it and then they'd say, they'd read out the inspirational thing that somebody wrote for them from the previous class. And then what the unexpected result was that sometimes people reached underneath their desk and there wasn't a letter there. And the answer was, well, we have a high standard here and not everybody graduates. But we want to make sure that we work with you if any barriers come up, and we're here to listen if life just is too much for a minute. If there is no further comments in here, I just want to, okay, yeah, cool. I think a thing just came in the chat.
What did you ask students to focus on in their letter to self?
I mean, I think we kept it pretty like plain when we asked them. We just said, hey, you all know why you're here. Today was the day that you decided to move this step forward. It wasn't last week. It wasn't last month. What was the thing that drove you? Like, why are you here today? What motivated you to come in today, right? What do you want from this experience and what will you be doing in the future? It was kind of, what is your whys?
The other thing I would like to add, if I could, Jake,
Mhm.
is when a student wasn't meeting the requirements, missed too many days, and they only had a very limited number of days they could miss, I learned something from Jake that I had never thought about before. Instead of, just saying to the student, look, you're out of here, you're done, you didn't follow the rules. It was always, maybe this isn't the right time for you. And it left that door open for the students to come back. And I think that made a huge difference because they did come back sometimes.
For Carrie, the students they wrote their name on the brick is at the end of the day, they were part of a larger thing. They were part of a group of people that were dedicated to doing the stuff, and it wasn't easy. So they were able to join like a wall that only featured people that had success. And it was an exclusive group, and you didn't get to join it if you didn't put in the work. So people would write little messages, like on it. But really, we just asked them to sign their name on with a fancy glitter marker on them and go from there. If if anyone has a question, continue to ask, but I do want to tell one story about working with somebody that stands different. And when I was younger, I didn't get everything right. And a gentleman came in and he had a very distinct face, a very large scar on his face. And it wasn't the right time for him. He was rough and he was mean and was disturbing the class. And he needed to go. He was causing more damage than it was. And he just he wasn't going to do it this time. And you always leave the door open though. And when I removed him from the class, he made a statement that he knew where I was going to walk out the door and he was going to kill me. Like blunt, like for real. I'm going to shoot you when you walk outside your car. And that sticks with you. That sticks with you when you hear that stuff. Many, many years later, my wife, Emily, who works in Head Start, had a table at an event. And I'm sitting there and like I came for the free pizza, right? I was gonna tell about the program, but I came for the free pizza. And that dude walks in. And it was definitely, and Marcia, if you don't remember this, I can tell you the person's name after the call. He walks in, and sure enough, it was dude. It was the guy. And we look at each other for a minute, and he walks over to me and he goes, Jake, okay, guy's name. He goes, so you still working there? Yep. Hey, did you ever graduate? He goes, no. And I go, well, when are you coming back? He's like, I'm barred from that building. I can't even come in there. I said I was going to kill you, man. And I'm like, no one's going to recognize you, man. I'm the only one that would recognize you. So come back. And he's like, you let me do that? And I go, yeah, the person that I knew back then wouldn't be at their kid's Head Start appointment. Come on. So he came back and he was a wonderful student. And he was one of my favorite people. And he ended up giving the speech at graduation. Keeping it open for the people.
Thanks, Jake. That is a wonderful way to wrap up our session. Thank you for sharing what you've learned over all these years and giving us some nuggets to take with us in the work that we do.